If you've been in the Lord of the Rings fandom, especially the movie fandom, for a while, you will have heard tale of marathons. And no, I'm not talking about running 26.2 miles, because I think that would actually kill me. I'm talking about Lord of the Rings marathons, where you sit down, ideally with some good company, and watch all 3 of the movies in a row. And this might seem like a relatively simple prospect, you just sit down and turn on the movies, but I would argue that there is a right way and a wrong way to do this type of event. So today I'm going to walk you through my process for hosting a Lord of the Rings marathon and show you how I make a hobbit-worthy feast while still being able to sit down and watch probably 90% of the movies. And my favorite way to do this is with the 7 hobbit meals as outlined by Pippin in the Fellowship film. Yes, that is a lot of food, but you're gonna be there for 12 hours, and I've found that frequent very tasty meals help keep everyone feeling pretty lively. And because I am a little bit crazy, I decided that I would pair each of those meals with a custom drink. And because 7 meals is a lot to plan, I really recommend finding somewhere to keep all of your ideas, inspiration, and recipes, such as Milanote. Milanote is the sponsor of today's video, and it is a super easy to use, super versatile tool for organizing any of your creative projects. And incidentally, it's a great place to start when you're gathering your thoughts for an event like Lord of the Rings Marathon. So today I'm going to show you the board that I used to plan this party. As you can see, Milanote acts as a really easy way to gather your thoughts, including images, little inspiration color swatches, notes, and checklists. And then if we go into this mood board here, we can find each of those 7 meals outlined with all of my ideas, combining images, notes, and links to get everything in one convenient place. For each meal, I kept notes on what sort of vibe I wanted it to have, like simple and sweet for breakfast and light and savory for luncheon. Then I was able to use Milanote's column function to group those notes with images for inspiration or links for recipes that I wanted to use. You can even make up documents within Milanote itself, where I was able to collect all of my recipes for this entire marathon. Here we have my other board, where I put together some thoughts on table settings for this event. I have some color swatches to establish the vibe, and I can bring in plenty of pictures to capture the sort of cozy, eclectic look that I wanted. I wanted it to be warm, but with some delicate touches, like this beautiful cake I was planning on making. I also wanted to include some things to set the mood in the room, like these fairy lights. It's really easy to put links in for products that I'm considering buying too. A super easy to use tool here is their web clipper, which allows you to use one click to take images and videos off the internet and put them directly on your board. Like this Shire ambiance video that I'll be able to use to set the mood as guests arrive. And my favorite part is probably their checklist function, where you can use it to make to-do lists like I did here, making sure that I had each of those meals sorted out, or you can use it as a shopping list like I did on my mood board, so you can have everything in one easy to reference place. Plus, if anybody is going to be helping you with this marathon, you can share the board with them so that they can see all of your inspiration images and recipes. Milanote was incredibly useful for this project because of its versatility. It lets me pair up recipes that I found with actual images of the dishes so that I could figure out how I wanted to plate it, and it helped me stay organized and on task throughout the planning process. But even if you're not planning a Lord of the Rings marathon, Milanote can be used to organize any of your creative projects, including art, animation, photography, and writing. In fact, I found out at the marathon that one of my friends uses Milanote to design theatrical productions, and he really swears by it. If you want to get your creative projects organized, you can try out Milanote via the link in my description for a completely free account with no time limit. I really appreciate Milanote sponsoring this video, and I appreciate all of you for checking out my sponsored links when I have them. So before we talk about specifically what I made for each of these 7 meals, as well as some other recommendations if you don't want to go as hardcore as I did, I'm going to give you a couple of tips and tricks that I have for planning a huge event like this while still being able to enjoy it yourself. And to do that, I'm going to have to reveal to you guys something very personal to me, and that is my spreadsheet. And on this spreadsheet, you will find a minute-to-minute guide of the entire 13 or 14 hours of that event, where I listed out everything from waking up to the 6 different times that I had to preheat the oven. And I know, this probably looks a little bit absurd, and you might be thinking to yourself, do I really need to know that I need to drain the egg noodles at 6:27 p.m.? And for me, the answer is yes. I found that laying out everything in incredibly explicit detail actually takes a lot of pressure off me for the day of. I don't have to sit there while the movie's playing wondering how long I was supposed to put the casserole in the oven for because I already have it pre-planned out. And of course, depending on how you decide to run the day, everybody's spreadsheets may look a little bit different, but I will link mine in the description if you want to check it out. It's pretty simple to put together though. You just plan what time each meal is going to be, and then using the recipe, you reference back to figure out at which timestamp everything needs to happen. It also helps to add in the context of what movie is going to be playing when, but make sure you add a little bit of buffer time in there. I added in probably 10 or 15 minutes before and after each movie, just because I would rather have things be ahead of schedule than behind. I had told attendees of my marathon that we were going to be done by 10:30, and we ended up being done by 9:30, which is definitely much better than things running way over time. My second tip is preparation. I ended up using basically the entire day before this event just on my feet cooking and getting everything ready so that all I had to do the next day was put it in the oven and be done. You could definitely streamline this process with help from family or friends, or just overall being a little bit more laid back about things than I am, but either way, you're probably going to want to make sure you dedicate some time to prepping for this event so that you're not scrambling to do it day of. That way, instead of whisking eggs or frosting cakes while Frodo saves Middle-earth, you can be right there in the action. My third tip is probably my best one, and it is kind of my secret weapon when it comes to events like these, but that is going for a walk. And I know it sounds kind of dumb and like it's just gonna make a long day even longer, but I absolutely swear by going just for like a 10 or 15 minute stroll in between the two towers and the Return of the King. Because at this point, you've arrived very early for this event, you've possibly driven for a while to get there, you've eaten 5 meals, you've been seated for 8 hours, and in all likelihood, people are starting to sit there and ask, so how long is the Return of the King again? At that point, you gotta get them up off their butts and take them for a walk. A little stroll gives everyone a chance to get up, digest a little, drink some water, and chat about the movies thus far. A few folks at my marathon were a little bit iffy about whether or not they wanted to go for a walk, but by the time we were all sitting back down and ready to start the next movie, they were all saying they were really glad that they did it. So if you glean anything from this video, let it be that. Go for a walk. You will thank me. But with all of that said, let's talk about what I made. And we're gonna start at breakfast with one of my favorites, which is homemade cinnamon rolls. These things have been a personal specialty of mine for at least 10 years, and they're super simple to make. It's just a yeasted dough, lots of cinnamon, butter, and sugar, but they taste like they came out of a real bakery. I made these and the cream cheese frosting that went with them a week beforehand because they freeze really well. You just set them out on the counter to thaw and rise a bit, and they're perfect the next day. Making things like bread products that can be easily frozen way ahead of time is a really great way to cut down on the workload for the day immediately before the marathon. And I paired this with some chai, which is my favorite way to start off the morning. It's pretty simple to make. You just dry toast some crushed spices and then simmer them with some water and fresh ginger. And you can steep the spices for quite a while before you add your tea, which keeps your tea from being too strong. I added a little bit of brown sugar and then served it with milk and a little bit of whiskey for those who wanted to start their morning off strong. If you're looking for something a little bit less technically bold and time-consuming, store-bought frozen cinnamon rolls are a great way to go, or you could just have someone pick up some pastries from an actual bakery. And you can hardly ever go wrong with just a plain hot breakfast tea. Second breakfast came just an hour and a half later, and I wanted something nice and hearty. I went with this egg and cheese casserole that uses a base of dry bread and is loaded with vegetables and bacon. This can be stored in the fridge overnight and was super simple to throw in the oven day of. We paired this with some hot coffee and Baileys, and while I will admit the casserole turned out a bit wet and it may look a little bit ominous on the plate, it was absolutely delicious. If you don't mind stepping away from the movie for a little while, you could always fry up some eggs and bacon for this course, or if you want something way easier, you could buy some breakfast sandwiches. As long as it is savory and warm, people are gonna be pretty happy. By the time Elevenses rolls around at, well, 11, you're gonna want something a little bit lighter and something that feels healthier at least. So I went with a pretty simple fruit tray. To dress it up a little, I made a dip out of whipped marshmallow fluff, cream cheese, and cinnamon, and we had mimosas with that. If you're looking to save some time, you could always buy a pre-made fruit tray from the store, or something like a fruit salad would be really, really nice at this time of day. If you want to be really on theme with what's happening on screen, you could always whip up some lembas bread using the recipe that I created for my first ever YouTube video. The video's a little old and my production quality was somewhat lesser, but the recipe still stands, and I think that the lemon version would be really, really great at this time of day. Now listen, for this marathon, I did try and keep my behind the scenes Lord of the Rings knowledge to myself as much as possible, but there is one moment that I will never not be able to speak about, and I think you guys can all agree with me.
Did you guys know that actually he broke his foot?
When he kicked the helmet. After a very full morning of eating, you're probably gonna want your lunch to be a little bit later, so we had ours around 1 p.m. For this, I made a warm potato salad with a recipe that I actually shared almost a year ago in my Hobbit picnic video, and I served that with some broiled salmon, dressed up with Dijon mustard, lemon, and a bit of honey. My housemate made some mulled cider with rum, and it was the perfect afternoon treat, just filling enough to take us through the 2 towers. If you're looking for some other meal options here, a salad would be great, maybe something with like roasted sweet potato and a nice vinaigrette, or you could always go with a sandwich tray. And then of course it's time for the most important meal of the day, tea. I decided to whip up a lemon blueberry cake topped with luscious cream cheese frosting. I'll admit that I made somebody else frost the cake because I have an ongoing and lasting fear of messing cakes up when I frost them, but it ended up looking absolutely adorable. We had some iced tea with this, topped off with raspberry liqueur to make a very easy spiked raspberry iced tea. You could of course do a more traditional tea experience with hot tea and biscuits or scones, but there are so many options for this meal, you just have to look around. Following our delightful evening walk, it was dinner time, and for that I made my signature chicken noodle soup. I make mine in a slow cooker or crock pot, and it's just chicken thighs, which is very important. You need chicken thighs, not breasts. And then it's just lots of vegetables, chicken broth, fresh herbs, and of course my secret ingredient, sweet corn. Once it's cooked on low for 6 or 8 hours, the chicken just shreds apart and you end up with an incredibly rich soup. I served this with some egg noodles and another one of my signature recipes for bread rolls. Incidentally, these bread rolls that I have made so many times, probably more than anything else I've made in the marathon, they were the only thing that was a true failure. I decided to bake them in a pan that I've never baked them in before, and it was just utterly the wrong shape, and the ones in the middle ended up being completely raw. I feel like there's some kind of a deep lesson to be learned there in terms of like not getting cocky or something, but I'm just gonna take this to mean that I still do not understand bread. Anyways, we had some fall-themed beer with this meal, and it was just so wonderful and cozy. There are some ways you could simplify this, maybe using a pre-cooked rotisserie chicken to make some quick soup, or buying pre-made bread rolls, but it really doesn't get easier than chicken noodle soup in a crock pot. Finally, we had supper, just about an hour and a half before the end of the Return of the King. And for this, I made a shepherd's pie. In all likelihood, purists would call this not at all a traditional recipe, but it is how I make it, with lots of veggies cooked down with red wine and fresh herbs and some ground beef. You could always use lamb, but beef is way easier to find. I prefer to make this in my Dutch oven so that I can just top it with mashed potatoes as it is and store it in the fridge overnight, and then bake it the next day until it is golden brown and served with some wine. My housemate has literally always been famed for hating shepherd's pie, but this shepherd's pie was able to change her mind. And if that's not a ringing endorsement, I don't know what is. Some good alternatives for this are maybe a slow-cooked stew, or a frozen lasagna, or some sort of another pasta dish. You want something easy to make and nice and rich to wrap up your evening. And it is very important that you serve this last meal at least an hour before the end of the movies, because, you know, in the last hour of the movies, you're gonna be a little bit too busy to eat. Maybe that's just me though. Now, I have shared all of these recipes in the description of this video, but keep in mind that you're going to want to adjust the proportions of the recipes depending on how many attendees you've got. We had a party of 9, and it actually ended up being like the perfect amount of food with no leftovers, but if you have less or more than that, you're gonna want to change things. I highly recommend that you do whatever you need to do to not be overwhelmed by this process, whether that means making it a potluck experience, sharing the workload across multiple people, or leaving out a couple of meals if you need to. Most important part is that everyone, including the host of the party, is having fun. Now, overall, do you need to go to all of this trouble in order to host a Lord of the Rings marathon? Absolutely not. It's fun to do all this cooking, and it's something I like to do, but the most important part is that you are together with friends taking in these stories. Especially if you're anything like me and you spend probably too much time mulling over these stories, watching them with a new group of people is like seeing them with a whole new set of eyes. I don't think I have ever laughed at these movies as much as I did this last time watching it, and it's an experience that I can't wait to repeat. Except next time I may make sure that my bread is fully baked. If you guys end up trying any of these recipes, which are linked below, please do let me know what you think. And I know that for some of you, Lord of the Rings marathons are a yearly occurrence, so I would love to hear how you guys do them. What's your favorite food to enjoy on the journey? If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like because it really helps me out, and subscribe if you want to see more Lord of the Rings content. And thank you so much to Milanote for sponsoring this video. If you want to try out Milanote for free with no time limit and get started organizing your creative projects, make sure you check them out in the link in my description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a very happy, hobbity day.